My wife slept with our lawyer during the custody fight over our $500, $0 estate, and now she's claiming she's entitled to half, despite me catching her on recordings planning to steal everything from me. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. It started with a gut feeling, one I couldn't quite shake, but I ignored it for a while. Had always been the kind of woman who kept her phone closed, but lately she'd be secretive about it, hiding it when I entered the room, texting late at night and brushing off my questions with a sharp attitude. At first, I told myself it was just her being protective, maybe even paranoid. We'd been married for 8 years, and I thought I knew her inside out. But then I started noticing the little things that didn't add up. She'd come home late from her book club, yet I'd find her phone pinging at odd hours, messages that disappeared quickly when I glanced her way. She started dressing differently, more provocative, sometimes even wearing outfits I'd never seen her wear before. And her attitude, bitchy, dismissive, like she was trying to push me away. I'd ask her what was wrong and she'd snap back, accusing me of being paranoid or controlling. That's when I began to suspect something was seriously off. It all came crashing down one afternoon when I was going through our shared bank account online, something I'd been doing out of habit just to keep track of expenses. That's when I saw the transfer. A sizable sum moved from our account to an account I didn't recognize. My heart sank. I clicked further and there it was, a withdrawal to a lawyer named Mark Stevens. I'd heard of him. He was our family lawyer, but I never suspected he'd be involved in anything shady. I remembered how I'd been pushing to settle the custody case quickly. She'd been angry when I suggested we take our time, and she'd always been more interested in the money than the well-being of our kids. Now, I was starting to connect the dots. Why would she need to transfer money to a lawyer? Was she planning something? Was she already doing it? I decided to dig deeper. Over the next few days, I tracked her online activity, checked her messages, and set up some hidden recordings. I was desperate to catch her in the act if she was cheating. What I found out was worse than I imagined. I caught her on a recorded call, planning a secret rendezvous with Mark Stevens. She was talking about how she'd meet him at the hotel downtown, how she was going to seal the deal to make sure she got what she wanted, our estate, our house, everything. That's when I knew for sure. Wasn't just cheating on me, she was planning to steal everything. I was furious, but I also felt betrayed on a level I never thought possible. How could she do this? How could she lie so convincingly? I felt sick. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with everything, was now planning her exit, and I was just an obstacle to her greed. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. All I knew was that I had proof, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The day I confronted, I felt like I was walking into a trap I'd set myself. I had the recordings, the bank statements, everything laid out in front of me like a blueprint of her betrayal. I thought about how she'd lied to my face so many times, how she'd spun stories about being stressed over the custody fight, all while plotting her escape. I couldn't believe I'd been blind for so long, trusting her, loving her through it all. Now I was just furious. I called her into the living room, my voice trembling but controlled. She looked at me with that familiar smirk, the one she always used when she was trying to hide something. She sat down, crossed her legs, and asked what was wrong. I pulled out my phone and played the recordings. Her face instantly lost all composure. Her eyes widened and her mouth opened as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. "Explain this," I demanded, holding the phone out toward her. "Tell me what you're planning with Mark Stevens. Tell me why you transferred that money. Are you planning to leave me? Are you planning to take everything?" Her reaction was a mixture of shock and anger. "You're crazy," she spat. "You're just paranoid. I don't know what you're talking about. Those recordings are fake. You've been spying on me." I shook my head, feeling the adrenaline surge. "I've got the proof, the bank statements, the calls. You've been planning this for weeks. You've been talking about how to take the house, the money, everything. You even said you'd make sure the kids get the best life with your lawyer. How could you lie so much?" She stood up abruptly, her face turning red. "You're overreacting. You're just jealous because I've been stressed. I didn't do anything wrong. You're making this all up because you're insecure. I love you, but you're just too paranoid. I deserve to be happy too." I stared at her in disbelief. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she deny everything after I had it all recorded? The betrayal hit me hard. I felt a mix of hurt and rage. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she was a selfish, manipulative bitch. But I kept my cool, knowing that losing my temper would help. I told her she needed to pack her bags and leave immediately. I couldn't stand to look at her, not after what I just uncovered. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the recordings and the bank statements. My mind was racing. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I kept asking myself how I hadn't seen it coming, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. She always played the victim, crying about how unfair everything was, but now I saw her for what she really was, a self-centered, greedy woman who'd rather have money and power than a real marriage. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and deeply hurt. I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my support, and she'd been plotting to take it all away from me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I kept replaying the confrontation, the lies, her sneering face as she dismissed everything I showed her. I knew I had to act, but I also knew this was just the beginning of a long, complicated fight. I was starting to realize that my life was about to change forever. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I knew I couldn't just sit around and let her walk all over me. I had the proof, the evidence of her betrayal, and now I had to figure out my next move. I spent the entire day planning how I was going to handle this mess. Part of me wanted to confront her again, to tear her apart with everything I had. But I also knew that if I did that blindly, I'd just be playing into her hands. I called my lawyer, David, who I've trusted for years. I explained everything, her secret meetings, the money transfers, the recordings, and asked what my options were. David was calm, methodical, the kind of guy who doesn't get emotional. "You've got solid ground," he said. "She's planning to take you to court for custody and half the estate, but you have the proof to fight her. We can file for an emergency hearing, get her out of the house, and start the process of protecting what's yours." Hearing that made my blood boil even more. I had worked hard for that estate, $500,000, a house I built with my own hands, investments I'd made over the years, and now she was trying to take it all away, all because she decided she wanted a bigger piece of the pie. The thought that she'd slept with the lawyer, that she'd planned to steal everything from me, made me want to smash something. But I kept my cool. I knew I had to be smart. That night I set up surveillance around the house. I didn't trust her to leave quietly, especially after I'd just exposed her. I also started drafting a detailed timeline, everything I knew about her plans, her conversations with Mark Stevens, her money moves. I wanted to be prepared for whatever court would throw at me. I also contacted a private investigator, just in case, someone who could help me gather more evidence if needed. Meanwhile, was acting even more bitchy and dismissive. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was just paranoid, that I was ruining everything because I didn't want her to be happy. She threw tantrums, shouted about how she deserved what's rightfully hers, and how I was just a jealous husband. But I knew better. I knew she was lying, sneaking around, plotting her escape. The most shocking moment came when I overheard her on the phone with her sister, bragging about how she'd finally get what she wanted: the house, the money, the kids. She even called the lawyer to confirm their next meeting, trying to keep everything under wraps. I recorded that too. I realized she'd been planning this for a long time, maybe even since before I suspected anything. All this was a whirlwind. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. Part of me wanted to fight her with everything I had, to make sure she paid for what she'd done. But I also knew that I had to stay focused, stay calm, and let the legal process work in my favor. I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my dignity, my sanity, and my future. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she wanted, not without a fight. By the time I scheduled the emergency court hearing, I was a mess of nerves and anger. I had all my evidence organized, recordings, bank statements, her own words caught on tape, and a detailed timeline of her plans. The day of the hearing, I dressed sharply, feeling like I was going into battle, showed up looking cocky like she already thought she had won. She was trying to play the innocent victim, tears in her eyes, claiming I was harassing her and that she was the one being wronged. But the judge wasn't buying it. My lawyer laid out everything: her secret meetings with Mark Stevens, the transfer of funds, her plans to take the house, the kids, the money. The recording spoke volumes. His face turned pale when confronted with her own words, her arguments falling apart under the weight of evidence. She tried to deny everything, but it was clear she was caught dead to rights. The judge granted me an immediate order of protection, which meant I had to leave the house within 24 hours. I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. Relief that I finally had some legal backing, but rage because I knew how much I'd lost: my marriage, my trust, my peace of mind. Watching her get escorted out of the house by the sheriff was surreal. She screamed and yelled, calling me every name in the book, but deep down I knew I had done what I had to do. That night I stayed up late, staring at the empty house, realizing how much everything had changed. I'd fought for what was mine, but it didn't erase the pain. I kept thinking about her lies, her manipulations, and how she'd planned to screw me over for months. I'd been so blind, so trusting. Now I was left to pick up the pieces. In the following days, I worked with my lawyer to freeze her assets, protect the estate, and prepare for the custody battle. It was a brutal process, but I was determined to stand my ground. I also installed security cameras and changed all the passwords. Her betrayal had made me realize how vulnerable I'd been. I felt like I had been sucker punched, but at the same time I was finally taking control of my life again. Meanwhile's attitude didn't soften. She called, texted, even showed up at the house, trying to guilt-trip me or manipulate her way back in. But I kept my distance. I knew her game now. She wasn't the woman I'd loved. She was a scheming, selfish woman who'd do anything to get what she wanted, even if it meant destroying everything. Path. The emotional toll was enormous. I went through phases: shock, anger, sadness, even moments of despair. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been holding on to a false idea of marriage, of trust. That illusion was shattered. Now I had to rebuild not just my estate but my sense of self. I knew that I would never fully forget what she did, but I also knew I had to move forward. This was the wake-up call I never wanted, but I refused to let it define me. I was done being a victim. I was going to fight for my future. The weeks that followed were the hardest I've ever gone through. The court battles, the endless meetings with lawyers, the constant paranoia that might try to sneak back in or do something even more destructive. I kept my guard up, and honestly, I felt like I was living in a war zone. Every time I thought about what she did, sleeping with our lawyer, plotting to steal everything, I felt a mixture of disgust and rage that never really went away. It was like a poison I carried inside me, but I knew I had to stay strong. One of the worst moments was when she showed up at the house unannounced, pretending to be remorseful. She was crying, claiming she made a mistake, that she loved me and only wanted to work things out. I looked at her and saw right through her act. I told her flat out that I didn't trust her anymore, that her lies and betrayal had burned too deep. I told her she'd lost her chance, that I was done playing her game. She screamed, threw a tantrum, even tried to guilt me into taking her back, but I didn't budge. I knew better now. My lawyer managed to get a court order that limited her access to the estate and the kids. We also filed for full custody, citing her betrayal and the fact that she'd been planning to take everything from me. The judge granted it, and I felt a strange sense of relief, finally some control back. Still, it didn't erase the pain. I kept replaying everything in my head, wondering how I'd missed all the signs. I kept asking myself if I could have done something different, if I was just naive to trust her so blindly. In the meantime, I started focusing on myself. I went to therapy, trying to process everything. I threw myself into work, poured my energy into rebuilding my financial security, and made sure I was emotionally prepared for whatever came next. I also cut off all contact with, except for legal communications. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. Every day was a struggle, but I knew I had no choice but to keep moving forward. One surprising thing was how many people reached out, friends, family, even some acquaintances I barely knew. They all told me I was lucky I found out when I did, that was never the person I thought she was. That helped a little, but deep down I still felt betrayed. I'd loved her, trusted her, and she'd turned around and stabbed me in the back for money and greed. I kept thinking about the life we'd built, the plans we'd made, and how suddenly it was all gone. Looking back, I realize I learned some harsh lessons. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be the biggest enemies. Money can make people do crazy things, and betrayal cuts deeper than I ever imagined. I don't know what the future holds now, but I do know that I'm stronger than I thought. I've been broken, but I refuse to stay that way. I've got a long road ahead, but I'm determined to rebuild my life and make sure I never get like this again. If I could give one piece of advice, it's this: trust your instincts and don't ignore the signs. When something feels off, it probably is. And when betrayal happens, don't hesitate to fight back. Legally, emotionally, whatever it takes. You owe it to yourself to protect what's yours and to never let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize that the biggest lesson I've taken away is how crucial it is to stay vigilant, even in the most seemingly stable relationships. I never thought I'd end up in a situation where I'd be betrayed so completely, but life has a way of showing you your true strength when you're at your lowest. Losing that sense of stability hurt more than I can put into words, but it also opened my eyes to the kind of person she really was: selfish, manipulative, and only out for herself. I've come to understand that trust, once broken, doesn't just heal overnight. It leaves scars, and those scars remind you to be cautious. I won't let myself be naive again. I've learned to read people better, to trust my instincts, and most importantly, to prioritize my own well-being. I realize now that I was holding on to a fantasy of what I thought marriage or love should be, something perfect, when the reality was much messier. People are complicated, and sometimes they're not who they pretend to be. The financial aspect hit me hard, too. I thought I was secure, but her greed almost cost me everything. That's a hard lesson, but I refuse to let it define me. I've rebuilt my finances from scratch, and I've become more cautious about who I trust with my money and my life. I also learned that legal action is often the only way to protect yourself when someone's intentions are malicious. You have to be willing to fight for what's right, even when it feels overwhelming. Most of all, I've realized that I need to focus on healing, emotionally, mentally, and physically. I've started therapy, and it's helping me process the anger and betrayal. I've also reconnected with friends and family who remind me of my worth. I still feel the sting of what happened, but I refuse to let it consume me. I want to rebuild a life based on honesty, respect, and genuine trust, something was never truly capable of giving. Looking back, I see that even in betrayal, there's a chance for growth. I've become more resilient, more aware, and more determined to protect myself from future heartbreaks. I want others to know that even when everything seems to fall apart, you can find a way to move forward. It might take time and it might be painful, but you're stronger than you think. Never underestimate your own ability to survive, to rebuild, and to come out the other side wiser. So, if there's one thing I want to leave here, it's this: don't ignore the signs of trouble. Trust yourself. And when betrayal happens, don't be afraid to fight back, legally, emotionally, and for your peace of mind. Because in the end, your happiness and integrity are worth more than anyone's lies or greed. I may have lost a lot, but I've gained something much more valuable: clarity, strength, and a new sense of purpose. And that's something no betrayal can ever take away from me.